How's it going, Crystal Masters? I'm coming in with your February debrief. These are some leftover questions from our session this month that I wanted to try and answer in a separate place for you. Some of the questions that you sent in, I'll just tell you, are going to be answered in future months. Like, why would I choose a sphere over a wand, for example, to do energy work? I have a whole month dedicated to working with spheres and Crystal Masters. So some of you had great questions, and I'm just going to tell you, hold tight because the answers are coming. Remember that Crystal Masters is a year-long course. And the reason is I think it takes that long to really get into the meat and potatoes of crystal healing and to take our time and move through all of the different options available to you as a crystal healer. And so some of your questions will be answered in future sessions. So I'm going to jump right in. Fontes asked, how does a double terminated wand that has one end that is a twin termination affect sending and receiving energy? It doesn't matter whether each termination is a single or a twin. It's still going to send and receive the same way. Some people might think that a twin termination, which means two attached points together making up one point, would be more powerful. In my experience, and I've worked with twin terminated wands, it's not necessarily the case. There's still that really clear, good, solid flow of energy. And so she was asking what's an ideal situation to use that wand. It really depends, Fontis, on whether you think the energy is more powerful or not. And then that could be a tool that you're going to use in cases where the energy is more stuck or more complex, tangled, as energies get sometimes. Hollywise asked, when holding the small spheres, because remember when I was doing the session, I had Patty holding two small spheres in her hands. Is it best to use two of the same, or can you use different stones? It's a fantastic question from Holly. And my answer is use your intuition. I tend to work with spheres in that way in pairs. And usually it's because I've chosen whatever the stone is with some intention, and I want to magnify that energy. And I also want the client or friend or family member who I'm working on to feel a good sense of balance of the energy too. And so if you give two different spheres, as long as you're doing that with intention, because you want both of those energies at play, then I think it's fine. And I appreciate the question. And Cindy Knapp asked, to ask further, is there an advantage to using spheres over tumbled palm or kabbas, etc.? And how should you use generic crystals, or should you use generic crystals or those associated with the chakras that are blocked? Again, your intuition is always going to be the best guide. So what I'm telling you, I don't really want to influence you too much. I want to give you my perspective, but I also want you to do what feels right to you for the work that you're doing. There isn't really an advantage to working with spheres over a palm stone, for example, or tumbled stones. Spheres, however, because of their shape, radiate that energy uniformly in all directions, whereas a palm stone or a tumbled stone is not perfectly spherical, and so the rotation of the energy can be not quite as powerful. Merkabas, on the other hand, and I love to work with a pair of Merkabas. I think I showed you guys during class that over on my healing tray where I do crystal healing in the classroom at Sage Goddess, I have a pair of small copper Merkabas, and I love to work with those. Merkabas I will also be teaching you about when we get to sacred geometry later in the year, but they are these little spinning wheels of light, and interdimensionally, and even in ancient times, as far back as Egypt, we have a lot of records about the Merkaba. Merkaba in ancient Egyptian means light, spirit, body, and it was a method of transportation for the spirit, for the soul. And I believe that it still is. And so if you want to give your client a really multi-dimensional experience, placing two Merkabas in their hands while you're working on them can really help them to drop into a deeper state of meditation. Andrea asked, how do you become a conduit without letting the energy into your field? It's such an important question, Andrea, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I want to tell you, for some of you who have these deeper questions about the flow of energy, you might want to consider upgrading to Soul Shift. Soul Shift, the whole focus of our work in February, for example, has been on the sacral chakra and how to open, align, and heal and balance the sacral chakra, which is the primary conduit for energy flow, especially for healers and for creatives. And when that center is open, it tends to facilitate flow throughout the sushumna, or the central channel. And we also talk about how to make sure that you are not depleting your own personal energy field. I talk a little bit about the adrenal glands and adrenal fatigue in Soul Shift this month too, so that might be interesting for you. You don't have to upgrade to Soul Shift, but I do want you to know that that's if you're interested in the energetics and some of these more complex discussions around how to manage the flow of energy, you're going to get more of a deeper dive in Soul Shift than I can give you in Crystal Masters, simply for lack of time. In Soul Shift, I have 4 classes a month with you. In Crystal Masters, I have 1. And so sometimes it's hard to fit everything into Crystal Masters, which is why the overflow goes to Soul Shift. I'm going to be teaching you, Andrea, in March, Crystal Masters, about how to open a vortex, a portal. And I do that in particular, when I'm extracting or removing energy from my own field or someone else's field, in order to give that energy a clear path and direction and a place to exit the healing space, so that the energy doesn't get trapped in my body or in the room that we're in, or in someone else who's in the room. And so that is, when you're removing energy, that's one thing to think about. More broadly, I think it's really important for healers to have balanced chakras. There's many people will tell you, and it's my belief too, I think the most important thing to ensure as a crystal healer is that you're doing your own healing work. When your chakras are blocked, it's much easier for energy to get trapped in your system and not flow through. And so a healed healer is a better open conduit for energy to flow through without it getting blocked in the system. The other thing is your intention, right? And and I mentioned this during our February session, but it bears repeating. I always consider myself working with a spirit team. And I always acknowledge that source is the source of energy, that God, Goddess, Great Spirit, however you choose to name and define that energy source. And so I'm really clear that the energy isn't coming from me, and therefore the energy that's moving isn't coming through me. I'm a channel for it, but that doesn't mean my physical body is a channel. That doesn't mean my personal energetic field, what I call the PEF. My PEF isn't the channel. And so when you open a circle to do ceremony or to do healing, you're really opening a secondary channel for energy to flow through. And then you become the conduit, but not in a physical way, not in an energetic way. That energy isn't coming from my solar plexus. It isn't coming from my sacral chakra. It's coming from the divine. And I'm simply there as one who's holding the container, opening the container, closing the container, managing the container, and working with the crystal allies and our tools and our wands and our spheres in order to direct the flow of energy. But I think, people who, and there are people, and I don't know if it's, their intention or a lack of training, really do see the energy as coming from them, that they're sending it from their hands or they're sending it from their feet. And it's, you do have your own energy field and flow, but, you as a human do not have the capacity, at least in my belief system, to heal someone else. That is a divine power. And I think at our best as healers, we're allowing those energies to flow through with intention in a safe container. April asks, so after you gathered the energy with the sphere, what did you do? Or what do you do? Do you need to open a portal to release the energy? Is this going to be covered next month? Do we leave a portal open through the whole session? In the Reiki classes I took, we opened and closed them many times, but that doesn't seem productive. I think I'll have more questions that'll be covered next month. And yes, we're going to be talking more about meridians. If you would like a bonus class solely focused on meridians, let me know. Sometimes people don't want the information to go too deep. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you feel like you're taking a course in Chinese medicine, which this is not, but certainly I'm happy to give you more information if you're seeking it. The answer for me is we're going to be learning about portal protocol in March, how to open portals for releasing energy. When I'm simply creating a flow of energy around a client, I don't open a portal. When I'm removing energy, extracting energy, then I open a portal. And so even though you gather energy in the sphere on the top of the wand, it's not energy that you're trying to remove. You're trying to gather in order to send that energy through the channel. But if I was gathering up pain in her right leg, right, I would want to consciously, before I begin, open a portal, give that energy a direction to flow through out of the field, and then close that portal when we're done. And we'll talk more about that in March. And Bonnie Perry, if a wand has a rounded tip, how is the energy different from a wand with a sharp tip? What would be the right situation for use of each? When would it be appropriate to use a wand like a ruby fuchsite kyanite wand or numite wands versus a quartz type wand? I think by rounded tip, you mean like a sphere as opposed to a point. And that was, you might want to go back and just refresh on the class this month. We talked about that in terms of how the wands work. So a rounded sphere or piece of quartz on the one end is a gathering tool as opposed to a directing tool. And so it coagulates energy all around the client and then directs the energy wherever you're pointing the terminated end. And that can just be a more concentrated experience as opposed to a double pointed or double terminated one, which is facilitating more of a general flow, but it's not accumulating energy. When it comes to the massage wands, like which are rounded on both ends, right? Like those ruby fuchsite kyanite wands or the numite wands, those I like to use when I'm doing body work, when I'm incorporating massage into my crystal healing, or light touch, or trying to move energy through the body with physical contact. Instead of using my hands to do that, when I use a wand, and I'm going to show you some techniques for that as well, when I use a wand to do that, oftentimes I'm more accurate with the movement of the energy, and the stone itself, of course, has its own healing properties, which are then, especially when you make contact with them on the skin, really do facilitate a stronger healing experience. Deanna asked, can we go more in depth about sending and receiving energies in situations differing for the use of single and double terminated wands? We will continue to talk over the course of the year. And as I show you different techniques, I'm going to be coming back and weaving back in our single and double terminated. If you have specific questions, I would love to know. And then I can also sort of double click and make sure I'm giving you the information that you're looking for. Angie had a similar question to the question above about not absorbing from your client and draining your own energy field, and how do you differentiate? I understand grounding. I don't know what I'm doing until I'm drained. I hope this makes sense. And it makes a lot of sense. And again, it's about starting to orient yourself in relationship to your client and recognizing that the energy is coming through, but it's not of you. And making sure that your own chakras are clear and open and the energy is flowing freely through your body, because one of the ways that we end up trapping energy is because our own energy centers are blocked. And so that's why I always say crystal healers have to heal themselves first, because you're much less likely, A, to take on the energy of a client, B, for it to get stuck in your energy field. I also make sure, so part of its intention, part of its protocol, if you're removing energy from a client, which is often how you would absorb some energy, you want to make sure you open a portal, and I'm going to be teaching you about that in March. Other things, yes, stay grounded. Take a salt bath every day. I do it every single day. I love working with Epsom salt in particular. I love Himalayan salt. You don't have to use very much salt. You don't have to add oils if you don't want to. You can just do a straight salt bath. At the very least, try to get your hands and your feet into salt water every day. It's a great purifier. Remember what I taught you in class about how energy flows through the body, and that you tend to be releasing energy through your hands and your feet. And then Allison asked, thanked Angie for her question and said she had a similar question at the beginning of class. I had said that it was my goal for everyone to know how to open their channel so they don't feel overwhelmed. Maybe I misunderstood, and that you would understand it by the end of the whole series. Yes, so I wish I could cover everything in more detail in one class so that you would feel like you kind of got everything you needed out of that one session, but it really does take a year to go through Crystal Masters. And like I said, Crystal Masters will give you sort of like the ground floor of all of that information. If you want more detail, Soul Shift is the right program for you. It is a much deeper dive on all of these things. We've been focused a lot in February in Soul Shift on how to open the central channel, and what role the sacral chakra, and to some extent astrology too. We looked at the asteroid Hygeia and its placement in the chart to help you understand how, as a healer, you tend to run energy. And so, Crystal Masters is $30 a month. Soul Shift is $90 a month. I know it's a more expensive program, but it's also 4 times the content. And so if you're looking for a deeper dive, especially on topics like this, you may want to consider upgrading to Soul Shift for the year. But we will be coming back. So you will know much more about how to run energy efficiently as we go through the year, because I'll tell you, it's my passion. It's the one thing I really don't hear other teachers talking about. And it's the one trap I think that crystal healers and healers in general fall into. I find that most healers can't sustain their practice. They'll be really successful and vibrant and passionate and working productively for a year or 2 or 3 years, but you don't see them 10, 20, 30 years later still doing that work at that same level. Or they'll have to take radical breaks. They'll have to take 2 months off a year or 4 months off a year because they aren't finding a sustainable way to run the energy. And because I prefer to work year round and do my work in a sustainable way, I've developed a lot of practices and techniques and learned a lot from teachers over my decades of training. And so little by little, by the end of the year, you will have a toolkit that is replete with ideas for how to do this work in a sustainable and safe way for yourself and for your clients too. MJ asked, are your clients always facing up on the table, or do you flip them over for back pain? And what cardinal direction do you position your table? It's a great question. I tend to have clients face up because most of my clients, I find doing that work in that way is better. Sometimes if I am doing specific extraction work on the back, and I've had a lot of clients with sciatic issues, for example, I will have them face down. When we set up a table in the classroom for your class, I wasn't thinking so much about cardinality and direction as I was thinking about the camera and the lighting. But in general, I think it depends on how you want to do your work. Some people like to have the table facing north. Some people really prefer to have the table facing west, which is the direction of healing. It's the direction of water, the direction of flow. And you can also think about what kind of healing that you're doing with your client, or what their particular need or intention is, and consider facing or directing the table in the direction aligned with that need. Larissa asked, if there's a blockage on one side, would you point the wand out from there or work with the nearest chakra? And I try to do both. I try to focus specifically on a micro level on the specific chakra, and then also on the macro level across the entire field, which is why you saw me continuing to sweep Patty's field. You need to move a little energy and then sweep, and then move a little energy and sweep. It's sort of like in body work and massage therapy, where when you're really getting into a muscle and trying to release the energy that's trapped in a muscle, after you really do a lot of focused work, it's good then to go through and massage the broader muscle area or surface area to move the energy, to move the toxins through the rest of the body. It's kind of a similar concept. But these are great questions, and I appreciate them. Dina asked, will we be getting a script of the opening and closing prayers that are to be recited before and after each crystal healing session? The answer is my team always takes notes for you. And so when we do that bonus class, my team will take notes, and then the transcription of that note, those notes will be in your classroom. And that will certainly include the opening and closing prayers. And I'm grateful that you asked for that. And one thing I would say, Dina, just sort of my philosophy in general, I would love to see you take whatever I give you and, make it your own, riff on it, make it authentic to you. Some of the ways that I do invocations and prayers may be too formal for you or too informal for you, or maybe I use a word or a phrase or something that doesn't resonate with you or isn't from your tradition. And so please feel free then to take what I offer you and adapt it, and really put your fingerprint on it. Don Marie asked, is it possible to misplace energy during body work? And if so, how do you avoid doing so? I don't think so. I have always found my sessions to be very guided, by my spirit guides and by my intuition. I've always found that, especially if your clients are open and they're calling in their spirit team to be present as well, which I always ask them to do, because that allows me better intuitive access to them during our session. I've never had an experience where I felt like I misplaced energy or removed energy that I shouldn't have, or wanted to put it back or anything like that. But I also work intuitively, I work somewhat slowly, and I work in alignment with my client. And also before the session, and that's why I want to spend quite a bit of time talking about protocol, I think it's really important to make sure you understand your client's intention, to be clear about your intention, to speak those intentions into the space, because all of that is part of establishing that relationship and making sure that the work that you do is effective and accurate. HD asked, when using the double terminated wand for self-healing and imagining the energy light moving into the area, would you say to visualize a white light or the color of the chakra? It's a great question too. And again, I'm going to say both. Sometimes remember that white light includes all of the other colors of light, right? And so white light to me is the ultimate amalgam or communion of all of the light rays. When I'm working on a specific area, I do tend to focus on and visualize the color of the chakra itself. So if I'm working in the sacral, I'm envisioning a beam of beautiful orange, tangerine, glowing light. Or if I'm in the root, I'm imagining a really bright, vibrant red Cabernet light. And then if I'm doing a sweep of the field, then I'll imagine that beam of white light, which is just pure divine peace in my experience. Another thing to think about too, I'm glad you asked this question, is, selenite really is that for me. Selenite is the essence of that white light of divinity, that white light of peace and beauty and clarity and sovereignty. And so it's one of the reasons I incorporate selenite into my practice. I always have a selenite wand with me of some kind. I either have a bar of it or a carved wand made out of it. I'm really committed to working with selenite. I think it's probably one of the real tricks in a crystal healer's toolkit, because it instantly clears energy. It never needs to be cleared. The only trick with selenite is making sure you remember it's water soluble, and so you don't want to charge or clear your selenite in water. You'd be heartbroken if you did, especially if you left it sitting in there overnight. But other than that, you don't really have to baby selenite. It is relatively soft on the measure of hardness scale, the Mohs scale, and so you also want to be careful not to drop it. It will shatter. But as long as you're gentle with it, it's a really powerful tool in your Crystal Healer collection. And then Amy Arabia had our last question for this particular debrief. Can a customer's lack of belief block the healing energy from coming in? And it's another great question, and I'm basing all of my answers on my own experience. I haven't had a lot of clients come to me and then be really resistant. I mean, I've had plenty of people in my life be super resistant to healing work in general, but they tend not to come to me and ask me to work on them. I do remember working on a client one time and feeling like there was resistance there. And I'm one of those people, I will call you out on it. I will actually say, I'm sensing some resistance and I'm wondering where that's coming from and if we can work through it, right? Because I do think you need your client to be a partner in the healing process. And we'll talk more about this during our preparation and setup for crystal healing. But, I like to ask my clients, and if you're in Soul Shift, you've seen me do this during our intuitive readings that we do every week. I always ask everyone in the group to invite their spirit guides to come closer, if they'd like a reading, to allow me access to their energy field, which allows me to make a stronger intuitive connection, creates more efficient and accurate readings. And so I think you need your client to be a partner in that process. But in my experience, most people who are on that table, most people who are coming to me are at least open-minded enough where they're not going to be an impediment or an obstacle to the work that we're doing. And if you're sensing that, I really think there's value, and I've gotten better at this as I've gotten older. So I think the work that I was doing in my 20s and 30s, I was a little more hesitant to say to someone, hey, I think there's resistance, or, even more bluntly, like, why are you here for a crystal healing session if it's clear that this is not what you want to do, right? But the number of those experiences has been so limited. And usually when people come to me, or at least in my experience, when they've come to me, they're at a point where, they're open. They recognize there's an issue or a challenge and nothing else has really worked. And so here we are, and we take it from there. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to send in these questions. I hope they've been helpful for you. And again, if you have questions specific to forms of stones, types of stones, protocol, and so forth, just know that a lot of your questions are going to be answered as we go through the course of the year. And if you are looking for a much deeper dive, feeling like you're craving more, would want to invite you to upgrade to Soul Shift if that feels right to you. And if not, just know there's so much more coming. We're only at the end of the second month of Crystal Masters. We have 10 months left to go. So we are just a sliver into the experience. And so I hope you're enjoying it. And I hope you're also excited about everything that lies ahead, as I know I am too. So in March, get ready. We're talking about energetic extraction. We're going to be covering Vogels and extractors, as well as portal protocol, how to open a safe container to release energy into so that it's not in the field, and you have fewer issues to worry about in terms of taking on energy that's not wanted. Aho, and on we go. Thanks so much, Crystal Masters. We'll see you soon.